having a therapist is annoying, but I think it's...
We can be, because we want you to be better.
Right, you're talking to one.
but I mean, though, the annoyance being because it's still that mirror.
Goodfellas is a simple mental space to heal and grow by a black man for everyone who's listening. I'm Hosea Chanchez, and this is Goodfellas.
Today on Goodfellas, we're going to take a deep dive into what it means to be a man. Manhood, as we like to call it. We're also going to take a look at what addiction has done to a lot of our families, a lot of our fathers, our friends. And we're actually going to find out what we can do to help one another. We started a conversation here at Goodfellas, but we're going to give you some tools and some tips to make it through it, you and your family members. I hope you enjoy this episode. Dom, introduce yourself, brother.
Thank you for having me.
Yes.
Hi, guys.
Yes.
Dominic Blackwell-Cooper, government name, but go by Dom, the artist, creative director, writer, producer, director, father. Yeah, I don't know.
All around. Awesome human being.
All around, yeah.
Does it all. Renaissance man of 2024.
Huh.
Yeah. How you doing today, doctor?
I'm doing great. I'm loving the energy right now, because I think this topic of manhood and understanding how we show up is so important for us, because we have to navigate so many different spaces. And also, being a black man is one part of so much of what we are. And so how does that touch all those other parts?
Yeah.
The father, the brother, the protector, the healer, all those things. How do you carry it all? So I'm excited to learn from Dom.
Yeah.
Tell us how you do it.
So that's a great way to enter this conversation, because the basic question I think we have is, what does it mean in 2024 now? What does it mean to be a man? I know growing up what it meant to be a man for me and my family. It meant hard work. It meant taking care of your bills, your responsibilities, your family, being kind and loving to the people that you meet, showing up for the people who love you and who you love. And just an all around responsibility is what it meant to be a man. And today I feel as if in some ways, the identity of manhood in itself, I won't say threatened, but it is challenged. There's so many different variables to what it means. So I'll start with you, Dom. For you, before we dig into your story, what does it mean to be a man to you?
Okay, let's start with the easy stuff.
Yeah.
Start with the light work.
Let's ease into it.
So, a word that comes to mind that's very, very much when I look at manhood now is accountability. And I really feel like if you can look at it holistically, I think it kind of comes back to that word. I think what you were saying, it's bills, it's this, it's showing up, but a lot of that just centers around accountability. It's without going too far into it, I know we have a whole conversation, but there's getting approached by people or getting into different conversations, and they'll be like, I can't believe you do that, or I can't believe, this is what your reality is. I'm like, it's holistically about being a man. I'm getting to be a middle-aged man, where it's like, well, that's just what it is. It's about being accountable to the choices I've made, the choices I haven't made, the choices that I'm going to make, but it's also making those decisions and being accountable to them. So I think manhood in its whole, to me, is about accountability.
Yeah. I love that.
That's beautiful.
Doctor?
That's beautiful. And I think so much of accountability is being accountable to yourself, right? Not necessarily always needing someone else to push you to do the things that you need to do in your life. And, as you were talking about all the different forms of accountability that we have as we get older, I think part of what happens with manhood when we really lean into it is that definition starts to expand, because the things in our life that we need to do, that we need to be accountable for, becomes greater, and the stakes become higher. When you start to think about taking care of other lives, when you start to thinking about taking care of your family, and the bills and all that, they mean something more than just what's in front of you. It's also talking about the legacy that you're building beyond you. And so how are you holding yourself accountable to that? And I just love that start with accountability.
Yeah.
So what does it mean to you to be a man?
Yeah. For me, being a man is really about being able to look yourself in the mirror and see the truth without wincing in many ways, and really being able to sit with that truth. Because I think sometimes when we look at what's happening in society, and to what Dom said, people are running away from their truth. And they're doing it in a way that really makes them hide not only from others, but from themselves. And so the moment you can stare into the mirror, see the cracks, the flaws, the gifts, see it all without that ego, without anything to filter it, and really sit with that and move forward authentically in life with that, to me, that's what it means to be a man.
Yeah. So an authentic life is what we can surmise that to, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I would say an authentic life that really pushes you to tap into all of the gifts that you have to give to the world.
Right.
And so I think that is what it means today. I'm hoping that's where we're going in terms of what it means to be a man.
Well, I mean, it's going to probably mean something different to every man.
Absolutely.
I think that's what this conversation will probably unfold for us, is that it means something different. But all of our excuses or reasons for being a man are very married.
Yeah.
Because I would say responsibility is what I described as manhood, accountability, and authenticity.
Yeah.
So that's actually a really awesome trifecta that we'll come back to at the end of the show. But I also, too, want to know what you guys feel. What is our role in society? For me, growing up in Alabama, our role in society was to uplift the community, to basically be the foundation, which I'll talk about that too, because I do believe that women are the foundation of humanity. But we were taught to be the foundation that the rest of the home is built on. In order for your family, your daughter, sons, they're all representing walls in a way. And in order for them to support the roof, which is their generation, you know, and it just repeats itself. So the foundation has to be strong, which is what I always identified manhood as in society. But now that we're here, and now that, you know, so much has changed with our culture, what does it mean in society?
There's a little bit more fluidity to it. There's a little bit more molding and wet clay that goes along with modern day manhood. I think that there's different things that we would never expect to be identified as, oh, that's masculine or that's manhood. Or for a better example, like I said, just getting into certain parts of the conversation, like I'm a single father. And it's one of those things where the roles that I take on, it's very interesting, the juxtaposition or dichotomy, whichever the proper word would be, to his mother and I, where it was ironic is he does art and like more philosophical things with me. FaceTimed them the other day and she's at the park playing baseball with them. And it's like the traditional roles aren't quite...
They're switched in a way.
They're switched in a way, but it's because I have a sensibility towards art and sensitivity and, you know, like things that I'm already drawn to. And it's, when you say, like you said, the foundation, I think it's always there at its core principle, but I don't think it's as rigid as it once was, where it's like, this is what it means. It's almost like, well, let's be open to the ideas of what manhood are in society, because I think that's what kind of stifles us in a way. But
part of what I was thinking about manhood today is freedom. Freedom to express in a way that we haven't been able to express ourselves before, based on what we need that's in front of us. Like your example is great, Dom, because, you know, naturally you're an artist and you're the mother of your child wants to play baseball. And in the past, we had to stick to certain roles because that's what was expected of us.
That's right.
And today I do see both that fluidity, and also I think there is a space to have a little less pressure to show up as the man that others think you should be. I actually have a lot of friends who their wives are the breadwinners of the home. Like they actually are not making as much money, or they're just staying home with the kids. And their wives are taking care of things. And what they figured out for their life, that's what fits for now. And it both helps the wife not feel pressure because she didn't want to take care of a lot of those child at-home responsibilities. And the father naturally was inclined to that. And they were able to have that space to move around.
You both mentioned slightly masculinity. You stopped yourself, Dom, you said it. And that's one of the things that I want us to talk about is masculinity manhood?
That's a great question.
You know, and should we be using them interchangeably as if they're the same thing? Are they?
I'm gonna say no. I think masculinity is a way of showing up that allows you to, deal with the hardships of the world. We traditionally think of masculinity as kind of the stronghold, the thing that is sturdy, and femininity is the thing that is lighter and connects more with the world in more fluid ways. But I think when you start to put manhood and make it synonymous with masculinity, you lose the opportunity for manhood to expand to the point where you can do things like we've been talking about here. And people talk about toxic masculinity and all of those different ways of showing up. I think there's some validity to that, but I also think that masculinity is a beautiful thing that we all should have access to, whether you're a man or whether you're a woman. And so for me, if we put manhood and masculinity together, then it becomes a situation where people aren't free to be themselves. I'll give you an example. I grew up in Washington, D.C., and I grew up during that time when D.C. was the murder capital of the world. And so my dad...
Oh, so current day.
It's a little...
It's a little better, but it's still like, come on. Yeah, it usually goes back and forth between you two.
But I remember growing up there, and there was a basketball court that was down the street from where I grew up, and my dad, super protective. He grew up in Philly. He dealt with his own things, right? So whenever we went to this basketball court, he was like, yo, be on point. Make sure you're looking around, heads on a swivel. You're doing X, Y, and Z, right?
Wow.
And so I was there as a kid. Went back, like 5-6 years ago. And as I was there, it was a beautiful park, actually. And I was like, you know what? I feel like I want to get a little workout in. I do my workouts there. And one of the moves in the workout I was doing, it was like this kind of fluid, like kind of almost yoga move. And because of how I was raised, I was like, I'm doing it like this. I'm doing the move like this, so nobody knows what's really good here. And I say that to say that idea of masculinity looks one way, or being a man is one way. It kept me from doing an exercise that actually was, I'm fine, everyone's fine, but it held me back. And so that's why I think when we start separating the two out, and you can say, I'm still a man, but I'm doing it this way, I'm doing it a different way. That's what I think gives us freedom to really show up differently and show up to our potential.
Yeah. Now that we're talking about this, I think that masculinity has been the problem the whole damn time with manhood, because we've intertwined the two things. And as we unpack this, one thing that's really obvious to me is that a lot of what it means to be a man has been wrapped up in masculinity.
I think masculinity is a lot about presentation too. And
Absolutely.
Not how you present yourself, but meaning, like you said, it's things that are societal markers that say this is a masculine thing. The way that I was behaving as an artist was things that I thought were appropriate to becoming Pablo Picasso or, F. Scott Fitzgerald or Ernest Hemingway. I thought it was drinking. I thought it was women. I thought it was the sensibilities that, like, this is masculinity, not manhood. Like I said, it's not about being accountable, but this is what men do, or this is what a masculine presence. I got to smoke cigars, drink whiskey. Yeah. And it's interesting now I have a 2-year-old boy named Fox who is going to grow up and be a man. His favorite color is pink. He spends the weekends with his mom, but he spends a significant amount of time with her as well. And I see the traits of that would be the softer, more delicate, feminine traits. And it's trying to click that thing off in my brain to go, what? That's not right. And it's like, because this is something that's a learned behavior of what's masculine, but realizing if I look inside of my own life and go, okay, well, if I was able to identify this in my youth or coming into adulthood or manhood, responsibility, accountability, things with awareness, why was I able to point this out? Now I have this chance to like watch this young man grow through his entire life or as long as I'm here for it. I'm going, well, there has to be a step off the brakes. So like you said, it's like, why don't you do that yoga move? He's going, oh, is it other people's self-perception of it?
Yeah,
exactly.
Or is it how I actually feel? Like,
and I think for me, part of what it was is it threatened my identity as a man. Yeah. So it was that intertwining. I think we're so conditioned to think not only people won't think this about us, but start to question yourself. And I think this idea of masculinity and toxic masculinity in particular, it comes from a place of feeling threatened and not safe being the kind of man that you may naturally want to be. Like getting back to the authenticity, I start getting defensive. right? And I start protecting things that I don't even need to protect.
Yeah, right, right.
You know I'm good. You know, why are you being so extra? Like I'm just be regular. You know what I mean? And it's that feeling of threat that I have to this important part of how I see I should do it. And I think once for me, part of, and this probably gets a little bit deeper, part of for me that started to break that is I had to start challenging my own father and the way he was teaching me to be a man, which I love. My father, I love dearly. He protected me, raised me. And also his perspective of manhood is very much aligned with what it looks like to be traditionally masculine.
Yeah.
And when you have that as someone who you love and admire and is also not giving you space to try other things like you think you might want to try in terms of what it means to be a man, it either kind of crumbles you and in the sense that I'm going to just kind of do what this person says, or it builds something up in you to take some risk and to challenge that and see if there's something different. And hopefully in that process, you not only grow, but you potentially teach those people who have been teaching you your whole life. And I see that in my dad now.
Yeah.
I see my dad opening up to things that, you know, I think he never would have thought about when he was younger because I took that risk.
Yeah.
We're essentially in today's time, we're dismantling what manhood is. And that's the fight that a lot of our young people and a lot of us and older people, especially older people, are having. I personally have seen, with my grandfather being his caregiver and being very close to him at 94, I've seen literally what happens to a man when he loses what he's identified as his manhood. And those are the parts for my grandfather and myself that break my heart the most, because I know that a lot of his worth has been wrapped up in his being able to provide for all of us, his entire family. And the beautiful part of that is us dismantling what it means to him and me learning about manhood through having compassion for him and seeing how he is changing, being able to trust me with his life, because he's no longer, the breadwinner in our family, and he no longer is able to do things for himself like he used to. And that's what he identified with as being a man. Now, my father personally, which is the foundation, as we talked about, of where most black men learn what it means to be a man. I think we've all kind of agreed on that. My father was an absentee father because he was an addict. My father was a drug addict. And so because of that, and is still an addict, our family has been really ruined in so many ways because of his lack of attention, care, compassion, empathy, manhood, and his ability to not be able to teach us, his children, what we needed to do in our lives. Hence the reason why my grandfather raised me, because my dad wasn't available mentally, spiritually, or, physically because of his addiction. Dom, one of the reasons you and I are really good friends is because not only of how compassionate you are, but the type of father you are. You literally went through some very challenging times in your life. And because of your child, you made some life-changing decisions in your life, which is completely the opposite of my father, who, because of his kids, he drug more into his addiction. But you, on the other hand, are living your life in a completely different way. So will you please share a little bit of your story with everybody about your being a father and how that led you to your sobriety because of your son?
I saw an opportunity to, we'll go back to the word accountability. There's a lot of sense of nonchalance when you're able to make art, make money, party, women, travel, like all that type of stuff comes into play. And we've worked together, like I said, a lot of years. We've been friends for longer. And I spent a lot of time drinking. There was stints with drugs on and off and things that don't want to give power to anymore. But alcohol was obviously the number one proprietor of my good behavior and bad behavior. Like, I think that what happens is you kind of can't unblur the lines of where the success is or what's fueling what. And it's natural ambition, natural talent, but then never knowing, is it the booze or is it Blackwell? Like, which one's really in control right now? And before Fox, my son, was born, I had looked into, oh shit, I know something's wrong. Like, I know I'm off. And it's getting to the pressure points of like, I'm not failing at anything, but something I learned to skip ahead was when I went to a rehab facility is nothing bad was happening yet. Had the money, had the, his mom, wonderful woman, had family, friends, like things that people who love me, another woman who loved me dearly, like, you know what I mean? Like places of comfort, places of safety, but it's like, I couldn't get past my own self. And so when I looked at how I was going to be present, I think was the best word, is I realized alcohol, because that's all that it was closer to when he was born, was alcohol was keeping me so disconnected to the point where it's like, to share something super hyper personal, it's like I'm going to see what the hospital is that he's going to be born at. We had done like a midwife situation. She had wanted a midwife situation through the UCLA program, whatever. I don't know how specific that is. Just
in case people need resources.
Meaning that we had to go to this hospital to deliver this baby because of this insurance policy that I had, blah, blah, blah. I remember missing a turn knowing where the hospital was so that I could scope out where the closest liquor store was. Because if I knew I was going to have to spend time here, ain't no fucking way I'm going to sit in this. Ain't no way I'm going to sit in this hospital
all this time.
But these were all the appointments are. This were, I know this is a new factor, a new place I have to be. And I think that's when it first started to set in. I was like, wait, is this a problem? Like, is this something that's going to be a problem going into my son being born? I have to be very honest about the situation. I didn't stop drinking the second that he was born, but it was within those first few weeks of, oh no, I have a responsibility to this little boy who has none of the trauma that I have. Wow. And I don't use that lightly. I mean, like, he has none of the decision making. My life ain't got nothing to do with his. That doesn't start from the day that he's born. So now this clean slate, and I'm already starting this slate off being selfish. I know what the problem is, or I know where the tension point with his mom and I are. I know why my friends, they don't say it, but they kind of like, you don't clean it up. But again, something I learned was nothing was wrong yet. And so I wanted to get ahead of it. And so that's why I made the choice was, okay, let me go see what sobriety looks like. And then that way, to be truthful, it was a full-time thing. It was like, I'm going to stop drinking. I'm going to stop doing drugs, all this stuff. But I went, at least I'll know now. At least I'll know what the baseline is. At least I'll know where I am. And then I can start to make decisions that I feel are best and not some blurred, I don't know. It was realistically when I had to fill out the birth certificate and I was a little hungover. And I'm like, am I spelling his name? But then I'm thinking, what if I mess this up? Like, it was just one of those decisions that I felt was necessary. And I encourage a lot of people to do it. I don't know what everybody's capabilities are, but it's been a much more enjoyable experience not having time spent away from him or taken from him because I want to drink. And I do have him 5 days out of the week. And I always think about that. I'm like, what if I was trying to piecemeal in drinking sessions?
Yeah, with him. Yeah.
Or having to call his mom and be like, oh, can you come get him? I got a meeting to go to. When really I'm like, I just want to go drink. I'm like, why would I take away from that experience I could have with him if it's just, okay, it's not going to be as wild of a time anymore. I don't know.
Wow.
But,
yeah.
Can I ask you a question, though? Yeah. How did you get out of it?
You start to look yourself in the mirror and go, oh, I don't like who I'm seeing right now. But I think what it was when I realized that I no longer had authority over my mental, especially. Physical was fine. I was a very high functioner. We know this. Meaning you and I, people were close to me. I was very high functioning. I just got to a point where I said, this is enough. And it became where all the friends who were trying to help started to peel back. Then you got all the family peeling back, and they're not doing anything negative. It's just kind of like, hey man, if this is what you're going to do, this is going to be on you. And it came to a point where I had fallen asleep with the baby. And it was one of those things where it jars you awake because you're going, oh, it's not about me anymore. Like, this isn't about me. Like, now I'm in such a selfish space in my life that I'm really picking a delayed hangover or delayed gratification. I don't know why I'm drinking, but I need to go figure this out because this little boy doesn't deserve to have a father who's not present. This little boy doesn't have a father that is short-tempered and especially now I look at it with him being with me so much. He's always, for the most part, with me or out and about or at events and stuff. Having to learn patience, having to learn compassion, having to learn empathy.
when you were talking about people peeling back, something that came to mind for me was that a moment where you felt like your manhood woke up? Because you were almost having to be independent now with the life that you're responsible for.
I got a phone call from a very close friend, actor buddy, who we have a lot of mutual respect for. And he's got a daughter. And when the drinking, 3 weeks into my son being born, he goes, shit ain't the same no more, man. He was like, you got to be a man. You got to stop this shit. That's all right. Like, and it didn't sink in until getting help and getting healed. But what he was saying was like, I'm recognizing that you're not recognizing something. Let me put it to you in the simplest of terms. It's time to man the fuck up.
Yeah.
And when you have to hear it and it's jarring because, to your point, it's like, well, what part of my manhood are you coming from? What part of me is off? Because like I said, the bank account, that's full. Everybody's taken care of. Mm-hmm. Everybody seems relatively happy. But then you're going, well, why is this being called out so many times? Like, man up, step up. And you're like, I'm paying for everything. What else I got to do? And it's like, oh, no, I'm not being the truest or most authentic version of myself because I'm allowing this poison to literally bring me down and not be in a present state all the time.
So many of our experiences are engulfed in fathers and in leaders in addiction. Mm-hmm. It's something that is very prevalent in our communities, in all communities, but specifically to ours, it's a very prevalent thing, and it's everywhere now. Mm-hmm. Everybody's, smoking weed or, popping pills, and it seems that for us particularly, it feels like in some ways ingrained in our culture. Mm. Isaiah, have you had any specific instances in your life where you dealt with addiction in this way?
I mean, I have been someone who's always been drawn to the risk in life and to try different things. And that's part of what caused the clash between me and my pops. I come from a very strict Christian household where you don't, you don't need to say anything else. You just don't.
Yeah. Right. Period.
You just don't. Right. And I'll never forget. I was my first year of college, and I was hanging out with some friends. I went to college in DC near where my parents live, and I decided, I was young when I started college, very young, 16, and what I decided I was going to take my first drink, and I said that's the thing I'm going to do right now. And I'll never forget, later on, my pops told me he was actually sitting on the campus watching
really
me as I was doing this thing, because he wanted to protect me so much, but at the same time, he had created a space where I didn't get a chance to explore life myself. Wow. And so I felt this urge to take risk in life, to try things. Now, I haven't personally been addicted to anything. And I think as men, when our definition of man is doing it on your own, it becomes so much harder to get away from addiction. And that's what I heard from he said man up, right?
Yeah, he said man up. I think there's something to your point that I used to describe it as a roller coaster. And I think that's such a rudimentary way of explaining it. But as a storyteller, it became the chase, the high, the fall. Like you become addicted to that narrative. I need to chase the drug. Once you kind of start to identify what those problems are, you do need a support system around you. But it makes it really hard because manhood says you got to put these boots on, step out into the world.
This is your role. This is how you got to present.
And this is, you don't ask for help. That was the craziest thing is once I started asking for help, or once I admitted I needed help, the resources flood in. I think society so much will tell you have to bury it, and there's so much shame that comes associated with addiction. But I'm like, I found it easier to just be drunk than have to sit back and look at why the hell I was drinking. And so the shame of like, okay, if I create my new, we talked about baselines earlier. If I just create a baseline of being buzzed all the time, then I never have to go and self-identify with what's actually wrong. Or am I jealous of somebody else's career? Or am I unhappy with where I'm at right here? Or if I'm going, or am I mad that these people are jealous. Like I'm using jealousy as a random example,
Right, but it makes sense.
But it's actually not random for us as men.
Makes
right?
because that's
Yeah.
because that's what you start comparing yourself.
Exactly.
And then I'm like, but what am I comparing? So then I'm going, well, what am I unhappy with? But then you don't answer those questions because you just hit at the bottom of a bottle, and then you're like, well, now I just got to get till tomorrow.
You're just numbing the pain. So it's a
cycle.
cliche cycle of numbing pain, and
But I think
that
part of the
cycle
fear is that if you get the answer to that question, you don't have anything to meet the solution. Like there's nothing that can solve it. Like that's who you are, right? And I think that, what am I running from? When you sit there and you look at the thing that you're running from, and it seems too big for you to overcome, that is terrifying. And so I'd rather just sit with what I know, the devil I know.
sometimes it doesn't go away. We just transfer it to another thing that maybe other people don't see. Or oftentimes people trade substance addictions for,
I got one for you. When son's born, go to rehab, get out. And something that's very key and important to what you said is having a plan. People don't have a plan. They want to go and try to battle against something or get over something or get through something without a plan or without having a support system. Mm-hmm. But I got a really good therapist. Annoying. Having a therapist is annoying, but I think it's...
We can be, because we want you to be better.
Right, you're talking to one.
but I mean, though, the annoyance being because it's still that mirror. It's still a reflection.
Accountability.
You hear it and you're going, well, that's not what I said. It's like, yes, you did. I'm telling you, I'm responding to, the information. And then you realize, oh, this person doesn't know me. They only know the things that I'm telling them. So they are giving it back to me. And she had a really good point because, she was there for an addiction specialist. And I'm calling her one day and I'm going, oh, I'm about to do this new job and here's the price point of it. And it was a gig and it was lucrative. And she goes, and I'm like, but I'm going to keep my other job. I'm going to do this maybe. And then I'm going to start this. And she's going, you're just transferring the energy of the addiction. She goes, you're not addicted to the alcohol. You're addicted to the thrill of the stakes. And because you have to push the stakes so much that you're willing to go and see, oh shit, how far can I push? Now that I have calmness and stability, now that I'm out of rehab, now that I have a relationship with my son, there's not enough. I don't have enough tension points. It was something you said earlier. I had to learn how to be comfortable in the calm and just go, nothing's wrong. All the bills are paid. My phone ain't ringing, whatever. But I had to learn very quickly. I did the exact thing that they tell you is going to happen. They're like, you don't get out of here. It's either going to be a woman. It's going to be some money. It's going to be another drug. It's going to be another addiction. A lot of people, it's exercise. A lot of people, it is pornography. A lot of people... becomes, like you said, the gambling is one you have to really watch out for because you need that rush.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm not addicted to work. And she goes, I'm listening. That's all you talking about. Yeah. She's like, I don't hear you one time say nothing about your son. I'm like, well, I'm not calling you about my son. She goes, but you're calling me about things that are important to you. Exactly. So she goes, so is this what it's going to be now? You're going to go push yourself and throw it into work. So the hours you used to spend drinking are now just another gig. She was like, you could do all this, but you're not carving out time to be a present father because that's what the goal was. And I'm like, oh, shit, like, not wrong. So it's to your point, like a lot of people, we just transfer somewhere else, but you got to be self-aware at a certain point and go, okay.
I think the more that we come in full circle to this idea of masculinity and think it means that I have to look strong at all times, it opens up a door for us to really think we can take on addiction ourselves, or it's not going to overcome us. And let's see how far we can go with this, right? Mm-hmm. Because I am the man, or I am a man in some way. And so I was just wondering if for you at all during that, journey in that moment, and like, how far can I push it? How much did that, intertwine with how you were thinking about yourself as a man or the man?
I think it played a lot into it because I think when you aren't self-satisfied, you look for the outlet. So I think with drinking, it becomes, there's a comfortability. I'm not facing the things that I actually need to go work on. I'm not doing the things that I actually need to go do. It makes you more comfortable socially. It makes you more comfortable in the work environment. Like I said, I was functioning. So it wasn't like I wasn't drinking. It was just, let me go do these things to kind of blur where I should be or what reality I kind of should be focusing on. And I think what happens is that feeling of being the man, it overtakes, and you have to convince yourself. And then the goal is to convince others. The issue being is when you don't really have anything to offer at that time, you just start changing people's reality for no reason. And that's when it started to become a little bit scary because, again, I remember one time I saw a perfect thing. We had lunch. I was so hungover and I had to drink to go to a lunch with you. It was the French joint that used to be by my place in Beverly Hills.
Sunset Plaza. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm like, oh man, like, and I remember Hosea being like, hey, you smell like liquor. And I was like, oh, it must be my shirt. Opposed to having an honest admittance of like, no, I'm going through a hard time right now. I'm struggling with some things. Yeah. But it's, oh, I had the shirt on last night. Like, it must be the booze. And I'm looking, why am I changing his perception of reality? He can smell liquor on my breath. Yeah. He just gave me a hug. How can, you know what I mean? But but I need to have a projection of everything's good because I don't see him on a daily basis. So I don't want
him to think this is who you are.
This is who I am.
Yeah.
Even though it's fully who I am. This is who I am. Like,
right.
This is who I drink. Like, this is, and this is a problem. But it's like, oh, I can't be vulnerable now.
So you're hiding. You're just hiding.
Yeah. Because what's the question you always start with? Friend, how you doing? I'm good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In our industry, it's the culture. You know what I mean? It's an artist's survival in so many ways to take a toke or have a little glass of wine, or so you don't think about, maybe this person has a problem that they can't handle.
I'll tell you
until you miss some deadlines or something like that, and then it's fair. Like, wait, what's happening?
No, that's fair. That's normally what it is.
You fumbling the bag.
Where's my script?
It's normally the deadlines that they kind of get you caught up with. Something that's always interesting I never thought about is when we think about addiction, and this also plays into the larger conversation about manhood. I'm thinking, but I remember going to the rehab facility, and I'm going in there, and I'm like, okay, I'm about to be in here with a bunch of junkies and a bunch of low lives and pieces of shit, and people ain't got their act together. Man, when I tell you, everybody in that place was clean cut, rich, wealthy, a doctor, had a doctorate,
bougie ass,
was a doctor, there was a practicing.
They were you.
They were me. They
Artist.
were practicing lawyer. There was another famous artist in there, and you go, oh, like this is the face of addiction. Like you said, this is so normalized that the ER doctor during COVID has a pill problem. The rich, wealthy investor dude can't stand the reality of facing his wife and kids, so he goes to his yacht to go drink. Mm-hmm. The writer-director who is sitting in his own head and not putting the stories out into the world is drinking to kind of quiet the extra voices. Mm-hmm. And you start to realize, everybody is the same or going through some stuff. But the healthiest thing when you get there is they go, what do you say when you first get there? Hi, my name is Dom, I'm an alcoholic. And it's that first admittance to it, and you go, why can't I tell this room full of strangers this? But I could have just gone to my friends and been like, hey man, like, I'm gonna need some help, or watch my back for a second, or you know what I mean? Like, because I shouldn't be drinking at 7 a.m. Like, understand that it's a problem, but you don't want to face the fact of why am I having a problem? Maybe I don't like the relationship that I'm in. Maybe I don't like my job. Maybe I don't like the fact that I am taking a huge risk, because that's what it is sometimes. I go into projects. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you have to start when that reality sets in. You're like, well, I'm deep into this. Like, I got to go through with it. And sometimes you're like, well, let me have one drink. And then I always say my problem wasn't the first one. It's the sixth one. It's the ninth one where you're like, okay, now I had too many.
My story with addiction, it did quite the opposite of what it did for you guys, but it still created a huge problem for me in my life. So my father's addiction, growing up, seeing all that he put my family through and himself through, more importantly, because I loved him and love him, it made me want to be nothing like my father. What it did for me is it made me very rigid. Mm-hmm. I've been rigid for a long time, but it made me very, very rigid and regimented in my life. And it made me put up boundaries for everything. Anything in my life that felt like addiction, I got rid of it. If I had gotten too close to a girl, I got rid of it. If I had gotten too close to a guy, I got rid of it. If I had, eaten too much, I stopped. Mm-hmm. I had been up into about 3 or 4 years ago, like right before COVID, I had been so regimented and rigid in what I would do, what I wouldn't do, because I didn't want to be connected to anything that I had to have, because I saw what having to have something and not having control over that it did for my father. So for me, it was quite the opposite. It ran me away from all the accountability and responsibility in my life. And anything that felt too consistent felt too repetitive, which was too close to addiction for me. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So it affected my love life probably the most, not trusting people that, I had given my heart to and friends and, people that I'm close to, I had always had this, much like a kid who parents leave in a way, there's this wall that you put up with people because you need to control your outcome. Like I needed to control my outcome because my father was out of control his entire fucking life. So for me, what that meant was, tighten up on everything, but life is outside of that. Like I said, until about 4, maybe 5 years ago, I had been so rigid and regimented in certain things that I really just started to live my life. Yeah. I stopped having the insecurity or the fear that I would be an addict, because that's something that haunts you when your parents have destroyed your life over addiction. You don't want to be an addict of any kind. So much so even that when I was suffering from back problems and things that I've had in my life, I didn't take pills until a certain point in time. And then I'd give them all away because I was afraid of, the Vicodins and the oxycodones and all those things. I'm operating my entire existence off of my father's not wanting to be my dad. So he was still very present in my life because of my fear and the connection to his addiction. So in a way, my life was crumbling too because of his addiction, if that makes sense.
No, it makes sense.
Makes so much
it shows
sense.
you how opposite addiction can affect all of us.
Yeah. And I think part of addiction and just the susceptibility we all have to it is because we all experience pain. To your point earlier, pain is the driver of what makes us want to escape in different ways, whether we're talking about escaping the pain of a family that you weren't taken care of because of your father's addiction, whether it's the pain of other things in your life and your trauma, whether it's the pain of not knowing how to connect emotionally with women in a certain way. And you go into these addictions because of the pain. And when you deal with that, and I'll speak for myself, when you deal with that, you do whatever can protect you. And usually the thing that can protect you feels like the thing that's constant, right? So I'll just push everyone away, or I'll just, chase after this thing. And it makes so much sense to me as you're talking about this, because it's a two-edged sword. It's also sometimes the same thing that gives us success in other areas in our life as a man, right?
That's right.
That discipline that I'm going to push it away, I'm going to focus on this, probably allowed you to get some places. Your drinking put you in certain circles, right? And
you use it as
you
a
were
tool,
talented, of course,
in a way,
but you were also someone who could be around it, and you start to associate that the way you're responding to pain with these addictions as the thing that's making you successful. And I think for me, you asked me earlier about, how do you really address some of these addictions that feel like they're overpowering you? You really have to change that definition of what it means to be you. Like when you were saying earlier, like I am, an alcoholic, right? And why can't you say this to the people who are closest to you? I mean, the reason is shame. But when we talk about shame, and especially as men, I think part of it is, how can we connect with other men in ways that don't bring shame up? There's this thing called shame attenuation, where you ask questions in a certain way so it doesn't bring shame. We sometimes keep things so close or on our own journey that we don't realize that when we share our pain, then it normalizes
Helps
other people's
other people.
pain.
Be
Make it
surprised, I'm telling you.
Yeah.
Like I understand what we're talking about, but me going into a work environment, friend environment, and telling people, not soapboxing, but just, I think a word that we haven't discussed, and I hope that we get to, is vulnerability. And I think inside of modern masculinity, we've allowed ourselves to have a sense of vulnerability inside of there. That shit opens up the doors for so many other people.
Floodgates.
I've gotten the random text to be like, so what was the name of that therapist again? Hey man, I think I've been drinking a little bit too much. When did you start to cue in? You know what I mean? You're getting the questions now, but realizing, well, why are you asking me? And I'm realizing, oh no, I opened up enough of a door. Maybe I just cracked a window where they don't feel as scared to be like, so how many drinks were you having a day? Or, you know what I mean? How much? I remember I was at work one time and these guys were talking about, oh, how much did you spend on liquor a week? Like a couple $100. I was like, I wish. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I wish.
Really?
But it was to your point. I was so addicted to drinking that I became addicted to working because I needed the money
To drink.
Yeah,
to drink.
fund it. Yeah.
I didn't want to change my lifestyle.
Yeah.
I'm having too much fun. I have too many parties, too many girls. There's too much shit going on that I enjoy. Why would I don't have a problem until, like you said, you take a step back and go, but I'm prioritizing the wrong things. So to your point, having not that this anybody else's responsibility, but I wish there would have been maybe somebody in my life that would have been like, let me come and share not an anecdotal thing, but let me tell you where I was, or let me see the traits that you're having that I've already experienced.
Yeah.
It'd been much more eye-opening. I think that's what it was, is when I went to the rehab facility and I saw success, and I was like, oh, this is blanketed. This ain't got nothing to do with socioeconomic status. This ain't got nothing to do with environmental factors. People deal with things, but when you push it away for too long, it's going to bubble up. And you just better hope you catch it. You better hope you catch it before it's gone all the way south.
And most often we don't catch it, because we don't have the discipline to navigate out of these things before they become boulders in our lives.
Of a woman that's very close to me that I love dearly, who's opened up a safe space, friendships. You know what I mean? I've even looked at my relationships with other people and been able to communicate with my son's mother in a better way, and not jumping off that. It's like, oh, we have to parent. Like, let me listen to, let me listen. Now that we're not in a romantic or I guess romantic relationship, but we have to be partners in raising this kid. Like, let me listen to what you're actually saying. Because now I'm sober to actually pay attention and understand. She'll say, I've already told you this. I go, when?
When, yeah.
When we talk about this? She's like,
wow.
But understanding, oh, this is my accountability, my responsibility to have to take and listen and understand. I can't continuously apologize for the past, but what I can do is not repeat it. And I think that's what's most important in what we talked about.
Amen.
Is understanding, looking ourselves in the face, in the mirror, and going, okay, even if I've done these things, I don't want to continue to do them.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
It seems to me like you are at a very beautiful place in your life. And your story, all of our stories, will help a lot of men dig themselves out of a hole. Because as we started the conversation about responsibility, accountability, it is our responsibility as men. And one of the cues that you've given so many times in here was that you were open to someone really seeing you for where you were in that moment. And I think that's a very important and valuable thing for us as a culture of men to understand, that when you see your brother suffering, or you have a hint about something that may be a problem or issue in another brother's life, it is our responsibility to be accountable to one another, because that's what life is about.
What would you have wanted others to do, say, or really just break that wall to move that forward?
That's a phenomenal question. I think it's something that everybody overlooks, that it's not a responsibility to somebody's addiction, but I think when you care about somebody or have compassion, especially empathy, because you might not be able to understand, addicts are one of the smartest, most well-adapted, well-versed, intellectual people you're ever going to meet, because you can put them anywhere, they're going to find their drug of choice. Like, they're going to get what they want.
Find a way to get what they need, yeah.
And it's about being self-aware. And I think what happens a lot of times, there's two ways to answer your question. The first is, to me, the wrong way, is people will approach it from a selfish need. I want you to get sober because of. Or I want to face your addiction because of me and how it's affected me. You said something earlier that was super, super, super poignant, and I wanted to get to touch on it.
Okay.
You said something in this conversation I wanted to touch on. Addicts, we're very good at pushing you away too. If you get in our way of what we want to do, if I find out you're going to be a problem, then no, I don't want to approach you with the conversation. I'm going to make sure I keep you at enough of a distance that now you're never going to know that I drink. Now I'm going to have you completely pushed over here, where you're not going to be a part of my life, to the fulfillment of where even our friendship should be. Because why would I do it for you? Are you going to give me money? Are you going to give me access to booze? Are you going to keep, you know what I mean? You're just pointing out a problem. But I think when it comes to how do you talk to somebody you care about, is one, getting into an environment that isn't going to be something that's super uncomfortable. I think a lot of people make the mistake of, I don't want to go to the bar with you because I don't know how to talk to you. It's like, that's where I feel most comfortable at. Come here into my world, and then don't go shame it, but be like, what are we doing here? When you go hold that mirror up, I'm telling you, addicts will start to go, what are you talking about? What are we doing here? Why are we here so many days out the week? Why are you here so many days out the week? And you can ease into a conversation that when you follow up the conversation, remember what we talked about? Somebody's much more easily available to be like, no, I don't remember what we talked about. Tell me again. We had a conversation about how you were saying maybe you're drinking too much. Let me offer up a different activity that we can go do. because that's all it's the time is there, but I don't really want to drink some, you know what I mean? Or
Yeah.
I noticed, but if you come at it as I've identified a problem and you don't have a solution, okay, well, watch this. Go stand over there, and then we're never going to talk about it again, opposed to coming, meeting somebody, and don't make it the first agenda to be like, we're going to get you sober today. That's not realistic.
Is there a right and wrong way to do it? I guess is ultimately what I'm trying to figure out, because what we don't want to do for certain is do something that's going to push someone deeper into their hole. Like, for instance, with my dad, I know our pressure to make him sober. What about me? All the stuff that we did in our interventions and all these ridiculous things, and I do mean they were ridiculous, to try to get him to sober up, it pushed him further. And he told me later in life, decade later or so, that the pressure that we put on him was the reason why he, and not us, but the pressure that life gave him was the reason he was an addict in the first place.
And then you're just adding to it.
And you're just adding to it. So after this friction, first thing he goes do and go get a hit, so you're making it worse in a way sometimes, right?
It's also about, like you said, I don't know if there's a right or wrong way, but speaking from experience, it's why'd you open up the door? What are you doing? That door's shut. Like, that, my drinking is over here. Why are you bringing it to this light? Like I said, you're not meeting me at the place that I'm at mentally, physically, emotionally. You gonna wait to invite me over to your house and call me out? Well, of course I'm gonna be on the defense. And like you're saying, if you keep putting pressure on an addict, we already have our escape. So put that pressure on me. You just gave me the excuse to go drink. I'm not gonna look at you. You're giving me hell. Oh, you hate me. Oh, you don't like me. You don't like my behavior. Oh, well, I'm just gonna go drink away. Because guess what? I'm gonna go to my cheaper therapist. If I'm gonna go to the bartender, you can't. Man, they coming at me. They talking, oh, I'm a piece of shit. I'm this, that, and the third. And the bartender, because the funniest thing
Just
is,
makes it worse.
It just makes it worse. Because the funniest thing is, addict, we never go, well, who said this to you? It's just up here. You're just spinning this narrative. But when somebody comes at you with compassion, I had another buddy one time, like I said, we sat there, and he just went, why are we still drinking? I was like, what you mean? He goes, ain't nobody here. What are we still doing here? And I'm like, oh man, like, because it's that self-realization. I think once people become self-realized, they can self-actualize and go get the help that they need.
This has been a really insightful conversation. So thank you guys so much for this. And I know this is going to be so helpful to so many of our viewers and listeners. And if you have an issue with substance abuse yourself, we're going to provide some information at the end of this episode for you. This topic and this conversation today is probably one that most of us need to have more often with our loved ones and our family members. So I hope as you're listening to this episode and watching us, it will inspire you to do something for not only yourself, but also the people you love. Few things that we brought up in this episode that were very pertinent and important to take away is accountability, responsibility, choices, and just making sure that you check in on yourself and checking in on other people. This is Goodfellas. I'd like to thank you guys personally for watching today's episode. And I'd also like to ask you to spread the word about our community. We're small and we're mighty, but we're healing and growing as men. And thank you in advance for helping share that. I'd also like to thank Dr. Isaiah Pickens for coming through and just being a brother, being a sounding board and a friend. And everybody needs that in their life. So if you want to help us keep the conversation going, or if you need to have a chat yourself, you can always reach out to us on our Facebook, our Instagram, or our TikTok. Fellas, let's grow.